Alrighty, welcome back into another episode of Getting Technical, brought to you by Better and Green. I am Ethan. With me, as always, is Wyatt. And Wyatt, tonight we're breaking down the 14th annual Champions Classic, first-ranked Kansas versus unranked Michigan State, and 19th-ranked Kentucky against 6th-ranked Duke. All games being played in Atlanta, Georgia, neutral site. We're coming off of our first show of the year where we both went 2-1. I did lose on the Kansas team that we'll be talking about here on the spread. You dropped the under in the Auburn and Houston game, but we were perfect other than that. So a good start to the show, good start to the season. How you been? And how have your actual bets been so far for this college basketball season?
Yeah, I've been taking it slow with college basketball, but it's all right. It's probably like 50-50. Unfortunately, my Wolverines got their first loss of the year and first loss under Dusty May on Sunday. They were up against Wake Forest, who last year was a pretty solid team. So I'm not super upset with the loss, but they were up big and then they kind of collapsed at the end. So that's a little upsetting for me. But yeah, I'm kind of my system early. It's kind of the same system me and you follow. When you see a fishy line, you take it. For example, national runner-up Duke was a small favorite against Yale. I know me and you were both on Yale in that game. Yale ended up losing, I think, by 8 or maybe 10, but covered in that game. So that's kind of the system I'm kind of following, just taking some small little ugly bets. And again, it's right around 500 right now, so nothing big, but yeah, excited to dive into one ranked game, but then probably Michigan State will be ranked sometime during this season. And then obviously number one Kansas. So excited to talk about these two games, watch these two games, get to know these teams a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, I was on Yale as well yesterday against Purdue, and then took McNeese State against Alabama. So those were actually my first two college basketball wins of the year. I was 0-3 prior, two of which were Michigan State player props. So what can you do? But without further ado, we'll get right into the first game here. We do have that first-ranked Kansas playing Michigan State. Currently, Michigan State is a 5.5 point underdog, over under 150.5. Pretty obvious where I'm going to go here, so I'm going to send it to you first to break this first game down.
Yeah, I mean it's a weird line here. This line did open at 6.5 in favor of Kansas, so it's dropped down a point from the betting percentages that I looked at. 88% of the bets coming in on DraftKings on Kansas spread, 81% of the bets on Pickett. And again, the line has moved down a point. Kansas is coming off a big win against North Carolina. They won that game 92-89. I believe that was on Saturday. So big win there for Kansas. They did almost lose that game. They were up quite a bit, and then kind of like Michigan against Wake, kind of let the other team back into it. But they ended up winning that game. And then Michigan State, starting off 2-0, but haven't really played a whole lot of competition. So it's just fishy to see the line move down for the number one team in the country off of probably one of the best wins in college basketball of the season. So I just was telling you before my strategy. It's the trust the ugly bet, trust the line is moving, especially against an 88%. Like I said on DraftKings, moving against that in favor of Michigan State. So I gotta, and I don't love it, but I do have to take Michigan State here at the plus 5.5. It will be a bet I will be taking tonight. Also like the under in this game as well. I know Kansas, like I said, 92-89 win against North Carolina, pretty high scoring game. Michigan State's put up some points, like I said, against a bunch of no names. But I think it might be a little obvious to take the over in this game. And if Michigan State's going to cover like the line suggests that it's going to do, it's going to have to be a lower scoring game. Michigan doesn't have the offensive talent, in my opinion. Michigan State doesn't have the offensive talent, in my opinion, to hang with Kentucky if it's going to be a shootout. So the only way Michigan State covers, in my mind, if they keep it a relatively low scoring game. So I do like the under, but my favorite play is Michigan State at the plus 5.5. I did quickly look at a couple of recent years. I know Michigan State always plays a couple of these really big games early in their schedule. So I looked back, and Michigan State usually plays a bunch of these teams close. I know they played Kansas, I think, in 2022 and lost that game by 12. But I did look at Kansas. Likewise, they also have some pretty big games in the recent years in their history, and then they usually always win that first game. So they won that North Carolina game, like I just mentioned. Then after that, they do seem to struggle. They've lost a couple games. They've played they've scored like 60 points, which is pretty low for a Kansas team. And they've done that multiple times in years past after coming off an emotional win like they just did. So I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think Michigan State ultimately covers, I really do think they have a possibility of knocking off Kansas tonight. So I'm not going to get there on the money line, but I definitely will get there on the spread. Probably my favorite bet of the day.
My internet oddly just kind of went out there for a minute, but then it jumped right back in. So I did miss just a bit of what you said in the middle. But yeah, it looks like we're still good here. So hopefully I don't repeat or whatever. But yeah, I also do like Michigan State plus the 5.5 points in this game. Um, yeah, also did some research. It has been these same four teams in this Champions Classic since 2011. Michigan State is 2-2 straight up against Kansas in their four meetings in this tournament style. Um, and they've had the same coaching staff for the entirety of this little tournament here. So um, they play Kansas pretty tight. And then also only 8 of the 26 games played in this um, Champions Classic have been decided by double digits. So usually close games that we get here. Obviously, Michigan State can still lose by single digits and not cover the 5.5 here, but I do just think Michigan State does have what it takes to hang with Kansas. Coaching Izzo as good as it gets, obviously. Like you mentioned, Kansas off that big win already against North Carolina, one they had to fight back in and squeak out a win by 3 points. So they could be feeling pretty good about themselves, already getting a nice ranked victory, a top 10 victory under their belt. Um, but really, a few reasons why I like State. Well, I'll say this too. I kind of actually like Kansas in the first half -3. Um, and then think Izzo is going to make adjustments at halftime. Michigan State has a tendency of coming out slow the first 5 to 10 minutes of a game, falling behind, and then kind of working their way back. I could see that happening again tonight. Um, but Michigan State, they lost Tyson Walker and AJ Hogard in the offseason, two kind of focal points of the offense. Um, so now they don't really have that one guy that you really key in on, I think, and they're just much more of a broad team. I mean, Jaden Akins is back. I've been to both Michigan State games so far. He looks really good. Um, yeah, Jeremy Fears back after being shot last year. He's looking like he can end up being a stud. Jace Richardson, the freshman, is going to be an absolute stud if he sticks around for a few years. Jackson Kohler's off just a huge game. So they have a lot of guys that can get it done. A new center is Amon Zapala, 7-footer, who can guard Dickinson pretty well. And that's really another point that I wanted to bring up. Izzo already has experience preparing to play Hunter Dickinson, which is obviously the focal point of Kansas's offense. Everything runs through him. So I do think that gives Izzo the edge with Dickinson obviously coming over from Michigan. So yeah, I think it's just too many points in this one. I think Bill Self, obviously a great coach over there at Kansas, but Izzo just as good, if not better. So I think, coaching edge is even, if not a slight edge to Michigan State. I think the spot is a little bit better for Sparty here. The history maybe a little bit better for Sparty as well. So I'm going to take the 5.5. Like you said, I'm not going to get ballsy enough to go for the outright win, but I do think they keep this one close and have a shot late. And then the nightcap here in the Champions Classic, the ranked matchup, we do have 19th ranked Kentucky technically at 6th ranked Duke again in Atlanta, Georgia. Duke is a 5.5 point favorite over under 160.5. Again, I'm going to throw this one to you. I don't love this game quite as much, but how are you breaking this one down?
Yeah, I'm really struggling here. For what it's worth, I do like looking at Ken Palm. I know there is that little scandal coming out that he maybe adjusts stats a little bit to teams that he likes, but I don't know if that was ever confirmed. I did see that on Twitter, but I still like Ken Palm just looking at his things, his stats and his models. He has Duke finishing the season with one loss. So Duke is his number 3 team in the country, despite, right now they're number 6. And then he has Kentucky ultimately finishing with 10 losses this season. So I think Kentucky, they lost their coach. They're still a very good team. They're a very high scoring team, but Kentucky just doesn't play defense. And according to Ken Baum, he does have that affecting them and infecting the record. So he has Duke quite heavily in this game. I do lean Duke. I do think Duke is the better team, but I'm just not going to overthink this game. I'm just going to take the over. Kentucky can score. They play absolutely no defense. I know 160.5 is quite a bit. It is a little bit of a public play, but I am seeing some money coming in on the over as well. So yeah, I don't want to overthink it because at the end of the day, when both of these teams are going to score 80 points easily, and then I'm going to be sweating out an under because I think it's sharp. It's just not something I want to do in this game. Kentucky flies up and down the court. I see their, um, someone's predicting possibly 80 possessions in this game. So just really quick back and forth, fast breaks. Duke isn't as quite as fast as Kentucky, but they do push the ball as well. So I'm just going to go pretty square, but I think it's going to hit. I have a really good feeling about it. And that's just the over of 160.5 in this game.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't talk anyone off of taking the over in that game. Like I said, I am kind of struggling with what I like in this one, but I do think I'm going to lean the Duke side here, minus the 5.5 points. And really, it's just kind of what you said. I think Duke ends up being the much better team this season than Kentucky. Uh, Cooper Flag obviously getting a lot of attention there at Duke as possibly the best player in the country. But one thing I'm really looking at in this matchup here is the coaching matchup. Unlike Kansas, Michigan State, which we just talked about, having two guys that have been here for the entirety of the Champions Classic, we have Duke with John Shire in only his third year in this classic, and then Kentucky with Mark Pope coming over from BYU in his first ever Champions Classic. So, and even though Shire's only been head coach for his third year here, he was on the coaching staff for Duke during I think all but two of these Champions Classics. So he does have much more experience here. He is 1-1 so far in his 2 seasons in the Champions Classic, getting a victory last year. So I do think that coaching edge is going to help here. And yeah, I just think Duke has the better roster. I think they're going to end up pulling away late. The one thing that does concern me is Kentucky, or Mark Pope came over from BYU, who, lived and died on the 3 last year, had a really nice run, a really good team, but if they had an off shooting night, they were capable of getting caught. So on the flip side, if they have a really good shooting night, they can hang with anybody. So I do think he is going to bring that mentality over to Kentucky. But Duke also shoots a good 3. I think it's going to take time for Pope to kind of install his new offense into Kentucky. And yeah, ultimately, I just think Duke is going to be the better team on the year, more experience here. So I'm going to lean laying it with Duke. I don't know if I'll actually get involved in this game. But yeah, best bet for me for all the games we've talked about here are Michigan State plus 5.5.
Yeah, that's also my favorite. And again, I do lean Duke. I do think Duke is going to be the better team in this game and throughout the season. I don't know how long Kentucky will stay ranked. With that being said, I could be very, very wrong there. But yeah, I completely agree. Michigan State is by far my favorite bet. And I don't love it because it is one of those gross lines betting against the number 1 team in the country. But again, just an emotional hangover possibly for Kansas and maybe overlooking Michigan State a little bit, which I don't think they would do with Tom Izzo and just how good Michigan State, notoriously is or, has been through, their entire season. So, or their entire history. So yeah, I got to go with the ugly. I probably will get heavily involved on Michigan State, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll probably look into player props. I didn't go over them here because I know they're pretty hard to bet outside of Michigan. I know only a few states offer those, so I didn't want to get too involved. But I will tweet out any player props that I do have in that game. Probably looking at some Michigan State guys to go over their point total or possibly 3. So if you are in a state that offers player props, and if you're interested in that, follow me on Twitter at eBainbridge26. Follow Wyatt as well at Worst Bets. We do always tweet out all of our plays. And other than that, guys, that's going to wrap it for this quick 2-game episode of Getting Technical. If you like this content, if you like betting on other sports, check out our channel. Please like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Let us know your best bet for these Champions Classic matchups tonight. Hope you guys enjoy the games, make some money, and until next time, we'll see you in next episode.
You better start listening to the Better in Green podcast. You will not regret it. Trust me, trust me, trust me. And hey, I'm Dean Blandino.
Welcome to Better in Green, to Better in Green, to Better in Green, listen in and cash out. That's what it's all about. Come on, let's make cash now. We always on spot and we cover all spot from the bottom to the top. Hey, shout out to Ethan, shout out to Wyatt, shout out to Ben. Welcome to our podcast, Better in Green.